Hunters, this episode of the Flushing and Dustin podcast is brought to you by our sponsors and patrons. Keeping our dogs safe while hunting, training, or traveling from one location to another is important to us. We keep a first aid kit from Gundog Outdoors in our trucks and carry one on our hunt-ready vests in the event our dogs obtain an injury while hunting. We also carry their water bottle to keep our dogs hydrated while in the field. To check out these products and other safety gear, head over to Gundog Outdoors at gundogoutdoors.com and use code RINGNEXT to save 10%. We transport our dogs to the hunting and training fields in our G3 Dakota 283 kennels. These kennels are one solid piece of military-grade material with a conveniently located handle on the top of the kennel to make it easier lifting in and out of our trucks. Dakota 283 also provides other specialized gear to ensure our dogs have enough water and food for a full day's hunt, and to safely store and secure our gear in our vehicles. Check out Dakota 283 at dakota283.com and use code RNR10 at checkout to save 10%. To receive a larger discount, become a patron at patreon.com, that's patreon.com. This will also get you included in our exclusive giveaways. Thank you to everyone for helping us continue to bring you Flushing and Dustin episodes.
Hi, hunters. Thank you for tuning into the Flushing and Dustin podcast brought to you by Nick and Tyler, the boys from Ringnecks and Retrievers. In this podcast, we will talk about guns, dogs, gear, and our successes and failures in the field through our combined 40 years of experience. We speak with hunters just like you from across the nation about their days in the field and the many memories they built with their friends and family. We are excited to have you listen. Now let's get to Flushing and Dustin. Hey hunters, thank you for tuning into the Flushing and Dustin podcast. We have a special guest, Todd from the Iowa DNR here today. He is the Iowa Upland Game Research Biologist, so we're going to get a lot of great information for you all. Todd, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself and a little bit about your position?
Okay, well, you already gave my title, so I kind of cover pheasants, quail, Hungarian partridge, cottontail, jackrabbits, statewide responsibility. So I do kind of our harvest surveys and our roadside surveys for monitoring populations. Any research projects we might do in those species would be running through me. So I work mostly on the grassland, agricultural land side of it. So I do work quite a bit with ag policy for the Wildlife Bureau too. So it's kind of where I spend most of my time. So always been an avid upland bird hunter. So kind of when I went to school, that's where I focused on. But I love to deer hunt, love to turkey hunt too. So
Yep. So then, do you travel the whole state of Iowa then to see all the public lands and things of that nature?
Yeah. So we have management staff statewide that take care of our public lands, and our private land staff obviously work on the private lands and things like IHAP. So
Yep.
They if they've got questions, they come to me about management. What should we be doing? What's the best things? Habitat types, arrangements, all those kinds of things. They have questions about different plant species or whatever.
Yep. And Tyler, you had a question earlier talking about IHAP. Todd, you brought that up. Tyler, why don't you shoot with that?
So I was actually looking at on Facebook. It was Iowa Upland Hunting, and one of the individuals, just pulling up my photos now because I took a screenshot, had an IHAP question. So the question is from this individual: does the owner of the IHAP property still have control of that property on the off season? And if possible, could an individual go there to train their dog, or would they need permission from that person who owns the IHAP land?
So our IHAP agreements generally run from September through May, I think is what is in our contract. So kind of, our early duck and dove seasons through the end of turkey season, and then the rest of the year, then they're kind of not open to the public. So, but as the landowner, you can certainly allow anybody you want on that property. It is their land. So if you want to train your dogs on that, you'd have to go seek the permission of the landowner to do it during that time frame.
Yeah. So what does you talk about the contracts for the IHAP? What does that all entail as a landowner? If a landowner was looking to get into the IHAP, what steps would they take?
So, when a lot of the other states around us developed access programs, and so, we kind of looked into that for a number of years. Probably the department spent 5 to 6 years. Kind of, even invited a lot of the other states in, Texas, North Dakota, Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, the other states that had walk-in programs. We had some input meetings with landowners here statewide, and just dialoguing with hunters. We thought the focus of ours should be more habitat oriented, because having access without good habitat doesn't really mean much. So our program is really focused on the habitat side of it. So we offer landowners incentives to help manage their habitat. And so usually we're talking about focusing on CRP. And so, whether that's burning better seedings, food plots, whatever they want to do, upgrade their seedings, we're providing those kinds of incentives. In exchange for kind of helping landowners with that work, they give us access. So that's really kind of what we do for the landowners. I've got these things to do, and here you guys will kind of help us do that. So it's a nice little perk for them, and then we get good habitat, so hopefully means better populations. And icing on the cake is really hunters having access to that
Yeah,
after that.
definitely.
So
So is the landowner that enrolls in the IHAP, are they then responsible for the maintenance of the grass and planting the food plots, or is that something that you guys help with, such as equipment for planting it, or if it's time to burn off the grass and redo it? Is that something you guys help with?
so we basically go in with the landowner. Usually landowners have some objectives, so we try to incorporate those in, where it's reasonable. And as far as doing the work, that's not us. We provide the incentives to landowners so they can hire contractors to get the work done that we've outlined in the plan and the agreement we've made with them. They can do it themselves if they want to, if they have the
Yep.
equipment. We don't really care, just as long as the work gets done and the habitat that we've kind of agreed to is there. That's the ultimate end product. So it's fairly flexible. Our agreements can run from 3 to 10 years. So usually we're focusing on CRP. That's a 10-year contract. So usually if we get them right when they're signing up, we probably get access for 10 years. I think our private lands guy told me that our average contract length is 7 years. So we tend to get much longer contracts. So
Nice.
that's nice, especially for hunters. It's going to be there for a few years.
And so going back to the land, are you constantly looking for IHAP land to come available? Or are you constantly asking farmers for this? And then on the other side of that, what's the process to you looking for just like wide open public land that you guys may own or the state may own, I guess?
So yeah, a lot of folks ask about, we get license fee increases and what are we doing with the money? And so of course, a lot of that goes to staff and the equipment and all the kinds of things that go along with just managing as much land as we have in the state.
Yep.
Which seems like a lot, but I think we're about dead last in the nation for the amount of public land. So,
That's crazy.
we'd obviously like to see that go up, but the department acquires around 4,000 acres a year in new public lands. So that's quite a bit of land, 40,000 acres in the last decade. That's about 62 square miles. So, and the department's kind of always had that long-term goal. Of course, the price of land's not getting cheaper.
No.
So, when we say we need license increases, if we want to keep buying at that rate, we're going to have to kind of keep going with the cost of living there to keep acquiring that amount, or we can't acquire that. So, that's why you see periodic license increases, because we're not hearing from hunters that they want fewer places to hunt. They want what we have plus more.
Yep.
So, that's kind of where the rubber hits the road. You got to be able to buy it.
Absolutely.
For it. So, so the IHAP's kind of nice, and we're not buying it. We're just buying access, whatever the term of that agreement is. So,
do you look for certain
the IHAP
things?
Program is, it stands for Iowa Habitat and Access Program, and it's actually a grant that's made available through the Federal Farm Bill, USDA.
Okay.
So we put in a request for $1.5 million a year ago and got it. And
Oh,
so that's what our staff been
Dang.
working on. So we spent about $1 million of that um, through about last month already. So we got another $500,000 of it to spend, but I think we've enrolled around 14,000 acres with that money. So about 22 square miles.
oh wow.
Additional
Is that
hunting land that'll be open this fall to
nice?
hunters. We hope a lot of it. We got a lot of signing to do and get agreements in place. But
Yeah.
so we're
You know,
thinking by this fall, the total program will probably be in the neighborhood of 30 or 40,000 acres, and it was a year and a half ago. It was around 20,000. So
one of the things that I've noticed with IHAP land is that I feel like there's always more birds on that land. I feel like the owners must, like you said, during the summer season or whatever you require of them, it really seems to work because I
well, I mean,
always see.
we're usually when our staff are visiting with them, we're applying the same habitat management we like to see on the public lands we own.
Yep.
So we want to see good management, whether it's burning or interseeding, including food plots doing winter cover, upgrading wetlands, if they're willing to do things like dove plots for us. And, we're trying to work all that in. Obviously got to work with the
Yep.
landowners and their objectives, but
Yep. Yep. How would you say the pheasant population was this year in Iowa, this past year?
Pheasant numbers were up from a year ago, about 18%, so about two birds a route. And actually, our counts on the eastern third of the state, from the northeast down to the southeast, were some of the best we've seen in 5, 10, 15 years for a lot of those regions.
Nice.
So I'm actually from Guttenberg, Iowa originally, so northeast Iowa, and I went up there hunting and we saw a load of birds up there. I was super impressed, especially with as hilly as it is. A lot of timber up there. Yeah, the numbers were great.
Yeah, that's kind of the reports I got most of the season. So, our hunter numbers have been up with COVID. We saw it this spring with turkey hunting. We've seen it with fishing license sales. So, we don't have just a small game license. So I can't tell you if our pheasant, because I don't have a pheasant license. We
Yep.
just have a basic
Yep.
hunting license,
Yep.
which deer hunters buy and turkey hunters buy and duck hunters. So I can't tell,
Yep.
when you buy it, I don't know what you're hunting, but we think pheasant hunter numbers are up this year. And with the higher populations, I'm expecting that our pheasant harvest could be the highest we've seen in 10 to 15 years,
Do you
maybe.
think this winter is gonna hurt that quite a bit?
Yes, I do, unfortunately.
I was worried you're gonna say that. I was worried you're gonna say that.
I was
It just
hoping you weren't
keeps
going to go
snowing.
there, so I didn't have to burst the bubble. But yes, this is not shaping up to be a good winter.
Yeah. So what do you guys, when you start doing the pheasant number, what's the process of calculating that?
So the pheasant roadside surveys was a project that was initiated by Iowa State way back in the 1930s. They did
Oh,
some
wow.
research there and found you can get a pretty good index to the population. I mean, you can't count all pheasants out there; it's just
Yeah.
not possible.
No.
But you can do a standardized survey and get a pretty good idea of the trend from year to year. And so that's basically what we've been using since then. They tinkered around with it for the first 20, 30 years, as we got better science. And so it's been standardized since 1962, roughly. So we've got over half a century of data basically being collected with the same methodology. So we've got 218 routes statewide. It's about two per county. So we drive 6,000 miles in the state. Our staff does around the first couple weeks of August. And it's usually same staff, same weather conditions, same routes, same, direction when they do the surveys. So gives me a pretty good index to what the population is. Matter of fact, I can almost predict what our pheasant harvest is going to be when I get that number.
Oh, really?
So probably one of the most comprehensive surveys I know of in the Midwest as far as game birds go. We have more routes than any of the states around us. So that's really what I do. I take a look at that and I get regional numbers, and then of course I can roll that up to a statewide number, but that's kind of how we make the prediction on the populations. The one thing that can influence it a little bit is it's kind of predicated on good dew. The first 2 weeks of August, the broods are half grown. So they're still hanging with the hen,
Yep.
but they're mature enough that the hen's comfortable bringing them out in the open. They're half grown, and so they can fly, and but we kind of depend on that heavy dew because they don't like to be wet. So if you get a
Yeah.
good heavy dew morning, they'll come to the roadside and just kind of loaf, waiting for things to dry off before they start doing their feeding for the day. And so, the counts weren't as good in the western side of the state this year, but we were also in a major drought. And it's hard to have dew when you don't have
Yeah.
any soil
Yep.
moisture. So,
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
our staff did the best. You always have some dew, but, it's really those super soaker dew mornings that give us the good counts. And that's kind of what the eastern side of the state had. They had a little bit more moisture work with in the
Yep.
west. And so I think that's kind of what we saw in the counts a little bit. They had really good counts over in the east, and that's true. They weren't quite as good in the west, but hunters tell me that in that part of the state did pretty good this fall too. So
Yeah, we had good luck out in the west
Yeah.
side of the state
Yeah,
when we went. It was where were we at again? I can't remember what that little town was called.
So we're going up to Sioux City. It was like Ottawa, I believe. Is the town name? I don't know if you're familiar with that, Todd, at
yep,
all.
yeah, it's out
Yep.
west.
Yep, that little town there. And I
Yep,
don't believe it
we're on
was
the
that.
river. Yep.
Yep, I don't believe it was that town, but it was a little bit north of there, northwest of there, just a little bit. And yeah, we went into a field that was right next to the town we were in, and literally 10 steps in, we kicked up what 8 roosters?
Yeah,
Just
it was
boom.
crazy.
Yeah.
It was
So
pretty cool to see.
so what you're doing is working.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing good habitat. Now, Mother Nature, I got no control over, so I can
Yeah.
change things there. But
So do you talk with Pheasants Forever then to try to know what this is, or I mean, just with your background, you kind of you're your own expert basically. Is that kind of what you do throughout the state then, or do
yeah, I
you
mean, that's what I
collaborate with other
was.
people? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I got my master's degree from South Dakota State, and so I kind of knew I wanted to work on upland birds. So
Yep.
yeah, that bookshelf here behind me is probably, got I've forgotten more about pheasants probably than most people ever know. So I mean, yeah, that's what I do. I'm kind of a geek that way, but yeah, I mean, I work with our staff. Pheasants Forever's had me at Pheasant Fest and their annual state meetings, and I work a lot with their farm bill biologists. I mean, some of their staff have been summer interns with me here at the DNR, and so yeah, we have a really good working relationship with Pheasants Forever, and
Nice.
I'm available to them anytime that they have questions and whatnot.
So when you're looking at the big picture of public lands, are you guys how do you determine what you want to burn, if you burn it, what you plant there? Like, how does that process take place? Like, all right, we're not seeing this here, we want to plant this, or we're not seeing many birds here, we want to do this, or is that even a process? Or like, I
Oh,
guess,
sure.
yeah,
I mean, that's what our public land managers do. I mean, our management units. There's 16 in the state that we divide this up the state into regions, and there's
yep,
16 regions. So each of our managers has about 6 counties they cover. So they're responsible for all the public land
okay,
in that region and their management unit. So, and that's usually a management unit team is a biologist, a tech 2, a tech 1. If they're lucky, they got 2 tech 1s, but most only have 1. And then we'll hire a couple summer kids for the summer. So,
yep,
and most of them have responsibility for probably in the neighborhood of 60 to 100,000 acres. I mean, it's a lot of land. And so, just maintaining the boundaries on that is a
Yeah.
task, let alone parking lots and signage and then talk about the fun stuff, actually managing the habitat. I mean,
yeah. I
so, I
guess you
mean,
don't.
they
I
do
don't
have
even.
their
I guess
workload.
you don't even think about that. Like all the signage and the parking. You don't even think about that when you're going in there. You mainly just think of the field. So yeah,
Well,
that's
just think about them. I mean, that big of an area, sometimes they're a 2-hour drive just to get there.
yeah.
You got to take tractors and planters and get it there. I mean, so our guys are on about a 3 to 5 year rotation. Just, I mean, logistics wise for the number of areas that we have and the staff we have. So that's kind of the rotation they stick with trying to do burnings and stuff.
Okay.
When it comes to like seedings and wetland management, we acquire property and Of course, we got to find the money to do the seeding, and so they just work it in schedules. We got to do dub plots every year, and as far as what goes on the areas, it's up to the guys. I mean, we don't manage. We manage for pheasants and waterfowl and turkeys and deer, and
Yeah.
we got fur bearer hunters, and
Yep.
we're responsible for songbirds and things that aren't hunted. So our managers are trying to look at all that and what makes sense for this area, and so there's kind of all that goes into it as well. when we're
Wow.
trying to plan.
That's incredible.
Yeah, there's a lot of logistics with being a land manager.
Just that number of acres, to keep track of all that and to be able to touch that each year, and to have it keep producing for hunters that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, so some of what our staff do every spring out there is just manage crop leases, because we've got a bunch of land that we own that we do let farmers crop. I mean, they do pay us a cash rent for it, but
Yep.
typically with most of those, having some cropland out there is good for wildlife. I mean, obviously we don't want too much. We don't want to get all the nesting cover or anything, but we also want food plots, but we're stretched so thin that a lot of times we'll do the crop lease and maybe cut them a break on the rent and say, hey, you leave us 5 acres over there. And, when you're out there harvesting and we have our food plot, it's just a way,
Yeah.
that way we don't need all that special equipment. They take care of all the spraying and all the stuff that needs to happen. If we're doing a brand new seeding on an area, we want to convert something, say to brome to a better native mix, our guys will rent that out. But, hey, we'll let you farm that for 3 years. They're going to get it all cleaned up, convert it, get it weed free, and then we go in and do the native seeding on it. Saved us all the expense of having to do that. And so, we're pretty creative about, how
Yeah.
we stretch the
So when-
dollars as far as we can.
Yeah. So when you guys acquire land, like you were talking earlier, you're getting X amount of acres this year. Is that what percentage of that is ready to be hunted? Would you say the year that you get it, or does it go through that process of like 3 years where you have to kind of get the grounds groomed prior to being ready to hunt it?
So, a lot of the land, like I said, we're trying to stretch our dollars every way we can. So a lot of times we're going to focus on like some WRP. So WRP is, Wetland Reserve Program that USDA runs. And it's basically USDA goes in and buys the agricultural rights of the land. So most of it, so they probably pay 75% of appraised value. And so what the landowner's left with is they can maybe do some timber harvest on it, or they can graze it or hay it maybe occasionally. Well, we kind of like that because we can go in and buy the other 25% and get some great habitat, and we're not paying 100% of the value. USDA has already bought part of it, and so that's one of the things we target. Stretch the dollars going further. So in a case like that, the WRP's probably improved the habitat already.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's good for sportsmen in the state. We don't have to spend more hunting dollars, improving it because it's already there. But we're going to go in and tweak it. Obviously, if we think it needs some more stuff. Another example is we just brought a fairly large chunk down in Madison County. I can't think of the name of it, but several, like 1,200 acres, I want to say at least.
Oh, wow.
And it was kind of a mix of crop, blowout pasture, and timber. And so it's got a lot of fescue on it, probably a lot of brome. We think there's a little bit of remnants in some of the pasture. And then, so, that area, we're probably going to keep cropping the better ground that should be cropped. We're going to retire the stuff that's erosive or, affects water quality or something quickly. But in that case, the staff are just going to kind of have to work it in. When can we break out some of that poor habitat and, get it worked up and try to do a seeding? So, to your original question, how soon can you hunt it? I mean, they're going to be open hunting right away, but, it may take us several years to get the habitat where we'd like it to be and where probably hunters want to see it. But it definitely varies based on the parcel that was purchased.
I had no idea that like, well, just as a hunter, you just don't think like all this goes into. You think, oh, they plant some
Yeah.
seed, whatever. But I mean, it's a lot of planning, a lot of work. You're getting people, in the regions within the state, taking care of thousands of acres. It's pretty incredible. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to think about it like if you're building a house. I mean,
Yeah.
houses seem pretty easy, but go build one. There's a lot
Yeah.
that goes into
Yeah.
it.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
Getting there.
how long have you been with the DNR for?
I've been with the DNR since 1995.
Oh
So
wow.
have you seen a lot of change from farmers in the state towards public ground, or not per se public ground, but IHAP, like wanting to enroll their acres into that, or more farmers wanting to get back into producing cover for birds and wildlife, or has crops still kind of just taken over?
I mean, our habitat trends are definitely downward. You know, between 2005 and 18, in 2005, we had about 3.6 million acres of potential habitat in the state. By 2018, that figure was 2.6 million. So we'd
Oh,
lost a
geez.
million acres of habitat.
Holy cow.
So that's, what does that mean? I mean, you get into numbers that big and people are like, okay, whatever. And I'm like, well, that's 1,500 square miles. I mean, that's a strip of habitat 5 miles wide that was stretched from Davenport to Omaha
Holy sh!
that we've lost. So imagine that. And, our hunters like, I want pheasant numbers like we had 10 years ago. And I'm like, can't
Wow.
do that.
Yeah, when you lose that big of habitat, my
And I
goodness.
mean, and so, hunters see, their piece is still there, but, two other pieces that maybe they never did hunted that were in the neighborhood are gone. Well, that's going to impact the piece you hunt because birds do move around and,
Yep.
go to different habitats. And so that's really the elephant in the room is that loss of habitat. So we're,
Wow.
I'm happy that our bird numbers did what they did the last couple of years, but it's really more the artifact of Mother Nature was kind to us. And so, the birds took advantage of the habitat we have. But if I want to grow the numbers in the state, we need to find some way to get a million acres of habitat back on the ground, and that's the challenge. So back to your question about cropping and stuff. Um, I don't think it's changed much in my career. I mean, landowners are out there making a living. I got relatives that are farmers, and I get it. So, if you want them to do habitat, the incentives have got to be there to do it. And so CRP is obviously probably the best pheasant program we've got in the state of Iowa. And, between 2018 and last year, we lost 130,000 acres because rental rates
Went up.
they're offering aren't very competitive. And so,
Wow.
this election changed administrations. So our former governor, Tom Vilsack's going to be back in as ag secretary. He's been generally a pretty strong supporter of CRP and keeping it competitive. And so I'm hoping that means that maybe we can go the other way here in the not too distant future and gain some acres. And that's probably what our bird hunters want to hear is
Yes, it is.
habitat. And
Hmm.
So, do you know much about Huns in Iowa? We've been getting this question a lot about Hungarian partridges, and we actually shot just one this year up in Cedar Rapids area. But where are we supposed to find them in Iowa? Are we looking for different cover? Like, I don't know anything about Huns, but everybody's like, "Oh, Huns, where can we find them?" So, just like throw it at us.
yeah, so they are from the arid steppe region of Asia. And so think of it as kind of um, a rangeland, low rainfall, kind of, not rank cover, kind of knee high, sparse grasses. So, within the United States, that you kind of find them from Iowa up into Canada and out toward Montana and comes some kind of the high mountain terrain a little bit.
Yeah.
So they do always seem to hang on here. We never seem to get super high numbers. I mean, I think actually the climate here is a little bit wetter than they probably prefer. So they always seem to do well here when we have dry years. And so, Our counts this year were up 44%, but hey, what do you know? It was kind of a major drought in 2/3 of the state this year. So
Yep.
um, as far as what they like, they're not going to be keying on like heavy cover like pheasants. They're not seeking out wetlands. They're not seeking out even CRP. They kind of use waterways and the crop fields, fence lines, maybe occasional plum thicket. Um, to be honest with you, the guys that truly chase them wait till we get snow cover and drive around in central Iowa and just spot the covey sitting out the middle of the plowed field. And then it's a matter of going knocking on the door, see if you can get permission. And then because they can see you coming,
Yeah.
trying to get in range. But if you flush the covey and break it up, you can probably get the singles better to hold than trying to sneak up on the whole covey. Yeah, they're a challenging bird to hunt. Now, if you go up into Canada or up in the Dakotas or out, even western South Dakota or whatnot, you start bumping them in the grasslands. Like I've gone out there numerous times hunting sharptails or prairie chickens, and you'll move a covey of Huns. I've hunted Huns around Sturgis, South Dakota, and you're kind of getting into the foothills of the Black Hills there. And so they're farming it or trying to farm where they can. And then you got all this kind of rangeland around it, occasional plum thickets. And we hit it one dry fall, and it seemed like every kind of plum thicket we went to, there was a covey of Huns busting out of it to the point we had to leash the dogs because they were running to the next thicket before we could keep up with them. And
That's crazy.
What kind of dogs are you hunting with?
I hunt with, well, I've had a Brittany, but I've been hunting mostly with draw hares the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
That breed. German wire hares, I guess, for the American term.
Yep. Those are cool looking dogs. I like their like beards that they have on them.
Gotta love the ugly dogs, man.
They're not ugly. What about grouse? Is there any grouse in the state of Iowa that you've been finding?
Yeah, we still have a population of rough grouse hanging on in northeast Iowa, but the numbers are very low. I mean, I think we know what the issue with them. It's just we don't have an active timber harvest industry in Iowa like they do in Minnesota or Michigan or Wisconsin. Our grouse aren't the aspen rotation that you see in those states. Ours is more of a hardwood. Back in the day, and I'm going to take you guys back to World War II, 50s, 60s, everybody had cattle. Everybody had pastures. You think about Northeast Iowa, and everybody's kind of burning firewood. I mean, we're all as economically efficient as we are today. And so you kind of had that keeping the forest kind of in a younger state, kind of that younger forest that they like. But kind of livestock have been consolidated. And so there's no need to try to maintain the fences on those tough pastures up there in them hills. And so, a lot of them through time get abandoned, and, initially that's great for grouse, but once they hit a certain point, then they're too old. And so I think what we've seen since the 1950s is, a lot of that land went vacant, and it was probably pretty good rough grouse hunting through about the 80s. But after 20, 30, 40 years of growth, the timber's getting too old and doesn't provide the habitat that they need. So basically our grouse numbers have been in long-term decline since the 80s. Our staff up there are trying to do some intensive timber cuts on some of our larger public areas. And, I think they've documented some increased drumming, but, we don't own 99% of the county, the rest of the county is staying where it is. And so it's nothing that hunters can pick up on. It's very small, isolated places where we can make some improvements. So.
That's crazy. I would never have guessed that.
Yeah, I mean, so folks ask, is there any hope for them? I never give up on wildlife. They're pretty resilient, and if you can make the habitat at least somewhat to what they need, they seem to respond. So there's lots of talk of biomass and maybe can we use that to produce energy? And obviously forest products is one of those things that they talk about. And I'm like, heck, if it ever takes off that we need to fuel our vehicles with some kind of wood-based ethanol, and people start growing stuff, they're talking about growing short rotation trees. And there's an opportunity. If we put enough of that on the landscape, that grouse might say, this is awesome. But, is that going to happen? You guys tell me. I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. So what is it about the young woods that they like?
Well, they really like that, that first 10 to 15 years right after an area is kind of clear cut, because you get that sapling. I mean, when you think about rough grouse, I don't know if you guys have ever chased rough grouse, but if you're in good stuff, you're almost bending over and pushing your way through it. And, I remember the first time I took my father-in-law rough grouse hunting, we were hunting along a trail up by Mille Lacs and in northern Minnesota. And, we'd gone like a quarter mile and I'd shot 15 times. And I come out and he's like, what are you shooting at? I can't even see him. And I'm like, what do you mean see him? I just heard the sound shot that way. Seeing them, you're never going to shoot one if you want to see one. So, I mean, that's their mechanism. I mean, that creates the habitat that they want for brood rearing, for nesting. I mean, they feed on a lot of the buds and stuff on those younger trees. Okay. And when it's that thick, aerial predators are big, like the sharp shins and coopers, and they just can't be effective hunting them in that kind of habitat. But once those trees get up around 3, 4, 5 inches and it starts shading out, they can get under there.
Oh, that makes sense. So if you're looking to go after some rough grouse, you'd want to find a younger timber in northeast Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, for us, so it's more of a hardwood thing. So a recent cutover area that's coming back, maybe in its second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, somewhere in there. It just depends on the rainfalls and soils. Of course, if you got some cedars mixed in with that, that's pretty good cover too. And
so like if someone, I guess, logs their timber, would that be 3 years after that, 4 years after that? That would be kind of like a place to look potentially.
Yep, you want the young forest probably getting up, overhead high, so 5, 6 feet. If it's not up to your waist or something, then it's not mature enough yet. But once it starts getting head high and it looks like something you'd prefer not to walk through, that's probably where the rough grouse are going to be.
Nice.
So up in Minnesota, Wisconsin, UP, when you hear about the classic rough grouse hunting, I mean, they come in and do their timber harvest, and it's obviously mostly aspen. And so they'll clear cut large areas. And of course, when the timber companies come in there, they're creating landing sites. And of course, they have lanes, they're following rough country and stuff. And so usually the department, I used to work up in northern Minnesota right when I got out of school. So I did a bunch of this stuff. And, they make them seed down those lanes to, limit erosions. And they have what they call the landing sites where, that's where they brought in the trees and loaded them on the trucks. And so they require that. And so that's a lot of times what the hunters are hunting up there. You hunt those edges along the lane. And so you flush the grouse out, and maybe you actually get a shot when they cross an open lane or something like that. Or, you can stand on the road and maybe have them, so. We don't really have that dynamic in Iowa.
Oh no, that's crazy. Like, now I want to go hunt some grouse.
It's a hoot.
Tyler
would be frustrating, but it's a hoot.
Tyler wouldn't be able to hit anything anyway, so he probably wouldn't go.
I might as well not even carry a gun. I can't see the thing. I might as well.
So Todd, grouse hunting, if you average one bird for 10 shots, you'd probably be doing well.
Jeez.
I never hit anything.
So Todd, you said you went to school in South Dakota. Did you grow up in South Dakota? You from South Dakota?
No, I actually grew up in upstate New York by the Canadian border.
Oh, wow.
Upstate New York boy, huh?
So yeah, I grew up hunting rough grouse. I was the primary upland bird. The pheasants there were pretty much the game and fish release there. I mean, there was a few wild birds, but it was a lot of timber. It wasn't. I mean, there is ag along Lake Ontario there in the St. Lawrence River, but it's limited. So, but yeah, that was my passion, going out the back door and chasing rough grouse, and then occasionally, when the state released some hen raised birds, usually we get there, my dad would go, now go chase them birds back into cover so it's more sporting. So he run down there. 10 birds are not very bright. So
no. So do you get out quite a bit and hunt yourself then?
Oh yeah, I'm
within
hunting
Iowa.
every day that I can. Yeah.
So Iowa, South Dakota. Do you normally travel?
Yeah. I mean, mostly pheasants are hunting in Iowa. My dad lives up in South Dakota now, and so usually I'll venture up there at Thanksgiving. But
Nice.
actually, they've been, the counts haven't been that good for South Dakota on the eastern side of it, kind of Brookings down by Sioux
Yep.
Falls. There is kind of
Yep.
where my dad lives, and so he's come down here and had better hunting with me the last couple of years than he's had up there. Now their numbers took a jump up this year, so he's doing a lot better this year. But
Yep. Yes, we go to South Dakota once every year. Last year we were by Aberdeen, southwest of
yeah,
there
you're
a little
you're
bit.
getting out in their core range there. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we were, we've done Watertown kind of around there, and we were in Winter, South Dakota one year. Um, I did not like winter at all. I don't think. I mean, we didn't see shit out there. There was nothing out there.
There was plenty of private ground birds, but nothing public. That there was barely any public ground for us to even get on. It was kind of crazy, but
Yeah, it can be a challenge in South Dakota, but I mean it's like anywhere. You kind of got to put your homework in to find the good areas and scout. So
yep.
On those IHAP lands, you guys have the boxes there, and you want people to fill out the cards, which we always do when we're done. Um, do you normally see a large number of birds taken off there, whether it be pheasant or quail or whatever the case may be? Or do you actually count those up through the year, or how's that all work?
yeah, I mean that was something I think we've kind of ended that part of the analysis of the IHAP. So IHAP came about, I want to say 2 or 3 farm bills ago, and so there was definitely Congress wanted to know what the return was on the dollars they were putting in
Yeah.
that program. So that's kind of why we had those boxes out
Okay.
there. We wanted to get a look at hunter numbers because when you know how many people are hunting those areas on average, there's a cost to go out hunting. You're buying fuel, buying food, buying shells.
Yep.
So we kind of use those survey cards to help us generate those kind of numbers so we could share back to Congress. And I think basically in a nutshell, this is nationwide now because we're not the only state participating. A lot of states are buying for those dollars. So, but I think it was, for every dollar Congress gave for the program, it was generating $10 in economic, benefits to
Oh wow.
the states that were doing them. So
Nice.
yeah, it's a pretty easy no-brainer. I mean, it definitely generates additional funding money throughout the economy.
That's something we wouldn't even think about.
Yeah.
So tell us about a couple of your best hunting stories. What do you got for us? Throw them at us.
Oh,
You obviously see a lot of land, so you got to give us one on Iowa and then one from wherever.
I went up to Webster County to hunt one of our pheasant safes with some of the Webster County Pheasants Forever guys, and those guys know how to do it right. So our pheasant safe requires, nesting cover and a food plot and a block of switchgrass for winter cover, minimum requirements. And I said, that's what we need when we're talking pheasant management. We want the bedroom, living room, and kitchen all right there. I don't want the birds have to fly anywhere, walk from one to the other. So we walk into that field, I don't know what it was, January 7th, right here at the end of the season. And I think, 100 birds got the switchgrass, and we pushed it up to the one corner, and 200 birds must have blown out 100 yards in
Holy
front of us.
cow.
And, it was just like,
That's
it was
awesome.
crunchy because we got in that first snow and, they could hear you coming. We sounded like a tank, but just cool to see that many birds.
That's
And
awesome
then
to see on public ground.
funny one, I was hunting this in September. I went out to South Dakota to hunt sharptails. And I think we shot our birds for the day. And so we were kind of hanging out on one of their public areas, they had a wheat field. And I thought, well, we'll chase some doves, for the evening, just something to do. And they were kind of landing on the round bales they still had out in the field. So I'm like, I shot a couple doves. I'm like, I'm going to set a couple on them round bales. That'll make good decoys. And just stood, went over 20, 30 yards away and stood by the other round bale, had a dove come in, shot it. I'm kind of watching the sky, and the next thing I know, this little sparrowhawk, northern harrier, comes in, hits my dove on the bale, falls on the ground, goes down and picks it up and tries to fly, but he can barely get off the ground. He's like a foot off the ground because the dove's as big as he is.
That's hilarious.
I run out there yelling at him, thinking he'd drop it, and heck, he just kept flying away.
Took your meal for the night.
Jeez.
Yeah, I had his free dove dinner.
You always hear that happening to people where a hawk flies down or something, takes their dog, and takes off with it.
That's crazy.
So, not to switch topics again, but tell us a little bit about sharptail hunting, because we actually want to do some of that this year out in South Dakota. You seem like you've had success with it. So, what's some of the things we need to be looking for, and maybe places we need to be going?
The thing out there, the biggest thing I've seen with sharptail hunting or prairie chickens, so they have a lot of federal land holdings out there, so they have national grasslands. So you guys have probably heard of the Fort Pierre National Grasslands right out there by Pierre.
Yeah.
So that's about as far north as prairie chickens go. They're more of a southern bird as far as hunting them. So, if you want to hunt prairie chickens and sharptails, Fort Pierre is a good place to go. Fort Pierre National Grasslands. We tend to go farther north up to the Grand River Grasslands, which is right up on the North Dakota border, kind of northwest South Dakota. And it's just sharptails there. So, like I said, occasionally we get lucky and we'll bump into some Huns. Don't see a ton of them, but that's where we go. And so the big thing with the prairie grouse is you're getting in a drier climate out there. If they're going to have a good hatch, they kind of need to have a wetter year rather than a drier year, because if they're on the drier side, they have poor hatch and you're not going to see many birds. And, prairie chickens and sharptails, their escape mechanism is they see you coming and flush before you get to them. They flush before you ever get to them.
Yeah.
So they like, about knee-high grass. They just stick their head up when they see you coming, gone. So you want a good hatch year because the young ones aren't that bright and you can get closer to them. If you have a bad hatch year, you're hunting adults, and good luck getting close to them. But that's kind of what you want to look for. So you want to call the state agency. It was a good hatch year. Matter of fact, were the last 2 years good hatch years? Because if they were, that second year is when you want to go hunt. There's probably going to be a lot of birds around.
Nice.
And then you just need to find the pastures that haven't been grazed completely down to a golf course. They're going to like I said, probably, mid shin to shin height.
Yeah.
You can find pastures like that, then you can have some success. Be prepared to walk, though. The landscape all looks the same and they're out there somewhere.
I've heard you got to put some miles in when you chase them.
Yeah. But it wasn't too bad. My dad is 75 now, and so we hunted probably 4 hours straight opening morning, probably a little more than that. Well, 5 hours just after lunch. I mean, our dogs were pretty much beat. It's that season opens around September 12th, so it's early, can be very warm.
Yep.
I'll warn you about that. Bring water for your dogs. But we had our limit, so I think a lot of people did. And then the next day, I think we had our limit again by noon or a little after. So
nice. And that's right. That grass probably isn't super thick, is it?
No, it's a lot easier walking than what we're used to banging through natives that are as tall as our shoulders here, constantly got to lift your feet, and all the grass out there is, not any higher than your knee. So
nice.
A lot easier walking. There's some porcupines. You could run into a rattlesnake. Of course, you got some prickly pear there. So, some things that you're not going to run into back here, but, your dogs figure out what prickly pear is after they hit it a couple times.
Forget what a porcupine is, too, after they hit that.
Starts doing its thing, but,
Yeah.
Porcupines are probably the worst thing. We had a dog get into, it was one of them deals where hunting some snowberry, which is about knee high, and we had just gotten up a big group of sharptails, shot some birds. Dogs went on point again. My father-in-law, short hair, went on point. We released it. She dove in there, and it was a porcupine. She was just full face, full chest. Couldn't get close to her to try to pull them ourselves, so we had to take her up to Hettinger, North Dakota, and he actually had to knock her out, and take out 70, 80 quills. And
jeepers.
That was a tough day that day, but
is that your only run in with porcupine?
Yeah, it's not uncommon out there. It's funny, because you think about porcupines in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and the timber, and you're standing out there in the grassland, the nearest tree's 3 miles away, and you run into a porcupine. I mean,
Jeez. What about rattlesnakes? How many of those have you seen?
rattlesnakes usually, I think I've probably been out there maybe a dozen times or so, a dozen different years, I guess. Um, and we run into rattlesnake once, maybe twice. So run into
Your,
more porcupines than we have rattlesnakes.
your dogs go after a rattlesnake?
Well, it depends on your dog. I mean, what's your dog do here when it runs into a big snake? If they probably chase them here, they probably will out there.
I don't know. I've never ran into one
Yeah.
here.
My dog's never seen one.
Yeah, see, I mean, here, October into November, when most of your snakes are already hibernated, but you're out there in September, you can have 80, 90-degree weather, and so they're probably
Yeah.
going in that mode at that time, even out there, but because there's probably been some cool nights, but you just never know, and so.
So we'll be heading out when like the end of November, so they'll probably be put away for the winter, hopefully.
Oh yeah, if you're out there when it's that cold, I mean, yeah, probably your snakes are going to drop off quite a bit by the time you get into October and stuff.
Yeah.
But your prairie grouse hunting gets tougher because they've been educated by then.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and we're not educated, so that's a bad mix.
That is a bad mix.
Yeah, there's not really any sneaking up on grouse. I mean, if I could
Yeah.
show you guys a picture, I mean, I mean, you can see for 10 miles. It's not
Yeah,
like
that's
you're going to
crazy.
sneak up on them.
Jeez. Well, we'll let you know how it goes this year, Todd. If we end up getting one, I'll send you a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were dry going into this fall. When I talked to the land managers out at Grand River, it'd been a really good nesting. They had moisture up and through June. So he's like, I think they did really good nesting. He's like, now we haven't had rain since and it's drying down, but he's like, I think the production was good. So it really depends on what they have this winter, next spring. I mean, I think next year could be a really good year, but really depends on what happens between now and next June.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Well, Todd, we just want to thank you for your time tonight. This was so informative that I'm just shocked by everything that goes on, and I had no idea. And I think a lot of our listeners probably will love listening to this too. Tyler, I don't